Welcome back to another video, everybody. Last time we looked at the skills section here in the database. So we're just going to keep right on rolling through here. We'll look at items next. It says data for non-equipment items such as recovery and event items. So here it's got a couple already installed by default. Already created here by default for people to check out. Now a lot of these are going to be kind of similar to what we saw in the skills tab, things like that, but we'll just go through them pretty quickly here. So this first one is a potion, and you can see the icon. It's just like a bottle of who knows what, magic potion, whatever. But they didn't include the description here. Just as the same thing. But with items, that's one thing you're probably going to want to definitely include, I would say, a description, unless you make the name totally obvious about what it does. So, because even though most people, that are used to RPGs and they play them and stuff, they're probably going to know what a potion does, but you can't, assume that they know. And maybe a potion in your game does something different than, what it normally does in most games, or, that sort of thing. So, a description, that's a good way to, clue people in, just what exactly your item or whatever is doing. So here we have this item type section. It's kind of like the skill types and everything. It says type of the item. Key items are typically related to story progression. So so here we have regular item, and then the other options are key items and then hidden items A and B. I'm honestly not sure what the difference between A and B is. I don't know if it says. Let's see if there's anything. No, there's no tooltip there, so I'm not sure what the difference between A and B is. It'd be one thing you probably have to play around with, but I'm guessing what they do is they hide it from the menu, like it could be acquired by the player but doesn't show up in the item menus or something like that. Not totally sure there, but in any case, regular item is something like you would expect to be able to use in the game, so it'll be, something that the player can, do stuff with. A key item usually is something that the player can't really do anything with, but they just carry it around in their inventory. So it's like something they have, but it's not something that you want them to be able to do something with directly. You can still use event commands and things to modify whether or not the player has a key item. So like, maybe on part of one of your quests or something in your game, you have them, acquire a key item, and then later on they give it to some character they meet or something, and then at that point you can remove the key item from their inventory using, commands and things for the event. But typically a key item is just kind of something that you wouldn't expect a player to actually be using, versus a regular item where they're going to be using it at some point for something a little more directly, or or even directly under the player's control of using it. So here we have price. This is just for when it's in the shop. It says price of the item. The player can sell the item for half of this price when the price is greater than 0. So if you have shops in your game where you can buy items, that sort of thing, then that's what this will affect. And then here we have a consumable yes or no option. This is whether or not the item disappears after use. So by default, it's yes. So as a player picks up one of these potions, it's a one-time use item. If you did, no on this consumable option, then they would only, then they could use this over and over as many times as they wanted, and it wouldn't go away from their inventory. So you may have some use to, to set that up as certain items as not consumable, so that the player can use them repeatedly no matter what. Or, consumable if you want them to have to stockpile them and use one each time that they, that they use the command, whatever. And here, just like with the skills, we have scope. And this is the same options, one enemy, all enemies, all that. You can even have items work on random enemies if you want. That's just kind of interesting. Or just the user by themselves. So if there's something that only is going to work for that character. And then here for this potion, it's one ally, because this is meant to be restorative, recovers hit points. So it makes sense to use it on your allies. The occasion is always, so just like with the skills, same thing, whether or not you can use them on the battle screen, the menu screen, both, or not at all. And then here, Invocation, we have some of the same things that we saw also on the skills tab. The speed at which, if there's more, the value that's added, it says, to the character's agility when determining the action order. So if you want potion to be used like immediately, no matter what, before any other action, then you set the speed really high, and then this will take precedence, and that sort of thing. Success rate here, it says probability that the use of the action succeeds. So if you wanted to be cruel and unusual to your players, you could say 50% success rate, or something like that, where even though they're using a potion, it might not work, or that sort of thing. So so that's one way you could set that up if you wanted something a little more or a little less reliable, I guess, for the player to it's like, yeah, you could use this and maybe it'll heal you and maybe it won't, that sort of thing. And then again, just like with skills, the number of repeats. So if you wanted to have a potion that healed 3 times, maybe you could do call it like pack of 3 potions or something, and then you can have it just perform the potion effect except repeat 3 times. That's one way you could do it. You could also just have it repeat 1 time and then increase the rate of recovery. That would also work, but however you want to do it there. And then TP gain, whether or not you gain any TP from using this item. In this case, you don't. The hit type, again, a certain hit, and then it's got its own animation that shows up on screen here. So damage type is listed as none here, and you'll see in this effects it says we have an effect to recover HP of 500. So let me just double click on that to show you how to do it. So you go into this recover section here, and it says recover HP. So you could either set it by percent or by a flat rate, or you could do a combination of both if you wanted. So so here it's doing it by 0%, so it's not taking the percentage of the players or the characters hit points into account here, and it's just adding a flat value of heal them by 500 hit points. So but if you wanted, you could do, say for example, like recover 25% of their health plus an extra 100 hit points, or something like that. So that's another way you could do it. Or you could just say recover 50% of your health, and just a totally flat just a total percentage, and no matter what, that's one way that can be helpful, because in certain games, or most games actually, for RPGs, the higher up you go in levels and things, those basic healing items that only do 500 points, well, when you've got 1,000 hit points, that's half your health. That's pretty helpful. But when you've got 5,000 hit points, that's only 10% of your health, so it's not as useful. You have to use 10 potions all of a sudden to reach or 5 potions to reach the potency that used to be at 1,000 hit points, or that sort of thing. So by using the percentage, that's one way you could say, okay, well, this basic potion heals, say, 25% of your health, and then it'll heal that much no matter what level your characters are at. So it gives it a little bit more staying power for the long term of the game in that way. But in this case, by default, it's just showing you a flat recovery. Another way you could set it up too here is in this damage. You could do HP recover, and then if you wanted to do the healing formula, you could even use the one from the skills, the heal skill, if you wanted to give you a basis idea of what to do it off of. And then that's another way you could do. Instead of having this, flat effect here, you would delete this one off, and instead you just use, HP recover, whatever your formula is. You can even just put a 500 in here if you wanted, just a flat rate. Wouldn't be a formula, but and then you have your variants that you can add to that in this way as well, including the critical hit possibility. So that's just another way to approach it if you wanted. So let's look at the next one here. That's magic water. Aside from the price changing and the effect being applied to magic points instead of hit points, it's pretty much the same difference as the potion. Not really that much else has changed in how they set it up, because it pretty much performs the same function. Except it's your magic points that it recovers, and it's a flat 200 points that it recovers. So, and here, in this next one, we have Dispel Herb, which this is kind of like a cure-all status effects sort of item. A lot of games, they'll make something like this be like one of the items you get later in the game because it cures everything. Like most of the time, you'll get specific items. Like if you're poisoned, it'll be an antidote or something like that, antidote herb or whatever, and that'll just remove poison by itself and not all the rest of these. But if you want to keep it simple, you can just use something like this where it's just one item that heals pretty much any ailments or, just about. And then here, it's the same thing. Regular item, it's consumable. It's got a pretty high price, compared to the other things, but it's pretty useful. This is something where maybe like the either here in the success rate or over here in this is another area where maybe if you wanted to make like a lesser version of this, you could do pretty much the same thing except change all of these to 50% chance of remove state or whatever. So I'll just double click one of these, and it says just to go back over this again, it says remove the specified state, and then so you pick whatever state you want, and then the rate that you want, the rate that you want to 100% chance is going to every single time is going to work and remove that. If you did a 50% chance, then it's a coin flip of whether or not it would remove that ailment or whatever, that status effect that you don't want. Another thing, like if you wanted to really mess with this and you wanted to make your items a little more interesting, you could do something like say for example, if we just limited this to only dealing with poison, you could say remove state poison 50% of the chance, and then you could go back in and do like to an empty blank one here and go to state, and you could do add state, and then you could pick poison from there, and you could say maybe like either 10% of the chance or 25% of the chance, something like that. So what it would do, it's like it has a 50% chance of removing your poison state, and you could just leave it at that, I guess, of remove poison 50% chance. But then if you wanted it to like add something else, like maybe a different status effect would make more sense, like add blindness by 25% or something. So it could be like a trade-off. It's like, well, okay, you have a coin flip whether or not your poison will go away, and then 1 in 4 chance of maybe also adding blindness to your character instead. So it would be pretty interesting to handle things like that, where it's like, okay, you really want that poison to go away? Well, maybe you can, and maybe it's not 100% chance, but or you could leave it at 100%, and so they'll always remove the poison, but maybe they'll get blindness from it, or that sort of thing, or silence, or whatever. So that is one way you can kind of like. It might not be the best experience for the player, like that might frustrate the player having too much of that sort of thing, but it just could be an interesting way to handle your items and things like that, to where it's not necessarily just a straightforward, like, 100% heals everything, you're perfect and good go. Like, make it a little more interesting for them. It's like, you might have a catch here. It's like, you could try that. And then maybe, somewhere else in your game, you would, maybe later on, or maybe it'll be a skill that costs, like, magic points or something, where you could say, okay, this just removes your poison 100% and there's no drawback, or, something like that. Maybe it could be a cheaper version versus a more expensive version of the item. There's all kinds of things you could do. But and then finally they have listed here Stimulant Item, which this is like the revival item. Basically, your player's knocked out and they need they need to come back to being able to function again after that from the battle or whatever. So here you can see the scope is 1 ally dead. So, knocked out, fainted, whatever term you use. They just call it dead in the menu here, so, whatever. Occasion as always, so you can use it inside a battle or outside a battle. Success rate, repeats, all those are the same. Certain hit, and, it uses its own revive animation. Now, this part over here is where it gets kind of interesting for this item, is because there's two things going on here. So the effect is to remove the state of knockout 100%. So 100% of the time it removes the knockout state, but that's not going to fix the player's hit points or whatever, their health. So in addition to that, they have this damage type of HP recover, and this is a little bit like what we were talking about for the potion too, where you can do it this way. So it removes the state of knockout, and they would still be at 0 HP if it removed the state of knockout. So in addition to that, they do HP recover, and then we've got a little formula here. So it says the target, which was B, if you'll remember from the example here. A was the user, and B was the target. So so the target of this item, so whatever character you use the stimulant on, their maximum hit point stat divided by 2 is what is recovered, and then with a 20% variance. So so you can see there, it would basically do 50%, give or take a little bit, to revive them from 0 hit points, and it removes the state of knockout. So that's how you would handle both those situations and get them back to, being functional members of the party and everything again. So again, just like before, if you want to add items, you change the maximum down here, and it adds more to this list, and so on and so forth. There's quite a bit of stuff you can do with items. When we went over the traits in the actors and classes section, when we were looking at those, that'll give you some better ideas for the types of effects that you can do that haven't really been covered just in these couple items here. But these are the main ones, the main useful ones that most games will be able to use, in a pretty good way. So